Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be going through our fantasy football auction values that we hate.
Hike!
All right, Joe. So why don't you start us off? Who's the first player whose value you just don't like?
Yeah. Well, the first player value I should say hate, not just not like here, Steve. But
strong,
that's
strong dislike.
yeah. I'm gonna go with quarterback Jalen Hurts. His certain value is at $29. I know a lot of places have this guy ranked as the number one quarterback, on their rankings. But I'm a little concerned about Jalen Hurts, especially because I think without Jason Kelsey, I'm curious to see if that tush push works. And he's a guy who heavily relies on rushing touchdowns. This is a guy who has never thrown for 4,000 yards in terms of passing yards. And then every year but his rookie year, he's gotten double digit touchdowns, including his most last year at 15. So he's had 38 total touchdowns on the year. I'm concerned if those touchdown numbers go down, then you're spending, $29 for the potential quarterback one. But if he doesn't get all those touchdowns, he's not going to. And not to mention, Saquon Barkley is at the running back position. And for whatever reason last year, DeAndre Swift, that guy could not find the end zone. He was the king of falling down at the 1 yard line. I don't know how it happened, but it did time in and time out. And then Jalen Hurts, you knew exactly what was coming the very next play. Jalen Hurts, tush push. So a lot of the reason I'm concerned with Jalen Hurts, is I think for him to reach the ceiling that you're paying, he's going to have to, throw more passing touchdowns and also throw for more yardage.
Yeah, it's interesting. I thought about Jalen Hurts as well. I didn't end up choosing him, but you and I are on a similar wavelength here. I think, Hurts has not had a running back like Saquon Barkley. I mean, we saw Miles Sanders have a really good season, but, to your point earlier, he still had a lot of rushing touchdowns. I think partly because of the impact of the tush push and Jason Kelsey at the center position. Now, it will be interesting because Kellen Moore, the new offensive coordinator, I feel like he uses motion quite a bit. He has more of a vertical passing game. So it will be interesting to see, will he, Hurts that is, exceed over the 4,000 yards. But I'm with you. I would think that he's going to have less rushing touchdowns. And if he does, then you're paying up for somebody who isn't going to give you the value.
Yeah, especially if you play in a league where you get the 6 points for rushing touchdown and only 4 for passing touchdowns. I mean, Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen, those guys are just absolute cheat codes in that format because they rush for so many touchdowns. So I'm just if he doesn't end up getting as many rushing touchdowns, it could hurt him this year.
Well, I mean, and not to mention, I mean, they did not end the season very well. You're hoping that Kellen Moore, him coming on board, rights the ship, but there's no guarantee that it happens.
Yeah, that is very true. I do think that, I don't know what was going on the second half of last year. They just absolutely fell out, collapsed. I'm expecting them to rebound this year, but you're right. I mean, he's still got to learn a new system with Kellen Moore, and it could take some time for him to adjust to that fully.
So the first player I'm going to be talking about that I hate as far as his value is going to be wide receiver Mike Evans. Oh, he's one of my favorite players. I feel like time and time again, I usually target him. But last year I didn't because I was worried about Baker. But he ended up, doing a lot better than I thought. I think a lot better than what most people thought. I mean, he, ended up having 1,255 yards and 13 touchdowns. Now, he's had high touchdowns before. Back in 2021, he had 14 touchdowns. In 2020, he had 13 touchdowns. But this is the most amount of yards he's had in the past 4 years. So he did really well. But the thing is with Mike Evans is you got him for like, what, $10 maybe last year. Now you got to pay up for 30. And I don't think I can't overstate this enough in my opinion. I think Dave Canales leaving that team and going to be the head coach of the Panthers. I don't know how he'll succeed as a head coach, but I do believe that he should be attributed as to why Baker Mayfield did as good as he did in Tampa. Now that he's no longer there, Todd Bowles is a very conservative coach. I think we'll see how this team kind of forms under new leadership there, but I don't know. If Mike Evans' value was lower, I'd be interested, but at $30, I just don't like it.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if you'll actually have to pay $30. Yeah, by the time you're at your draft, very well could be that, but it's hard. I get the $30 mark and I get your argument, but it's just so hard to bet against this guy. And I wasn't on him last year because I was worried about Baker Mayfield. I do think there's regression for Baker in this offense, but all this guy does is go out there and get 1,000 yards receiving, and he's done it time and time again, no matter what quarterback's there. It's hard for me to bet against him, but you're right. I don't love the $30 price tag. If I would definitely, I'm interested in Mike Evans, but $30 does seem a little steep.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, here's the thing. He has every year gotten those over 1,000 yards. So
Right.
I tend to agree with you. I just think the $30 to me, it's got to be $10 less at least. And maybe you can, but at 30, it's too much.
Oh, you're not even willing to go more than 10?
No, 10 less than 30. So I'm saying 20.
Okay.
In the $15, $20 range, it's much more palatable. At 30, no
Right.
way.
Yeah, I agree with you. In the $20 range, I'd be all for it. But once you get to 30, there's other receiver. That's the thing. Receivers are so deep that if somebody's paying up for $30 for Mike Evans, you can definitely grab some decent values later.
Are you enjoying this episode so far? Well, if you are, subscribe to our YouTube channel, smash that like button, and hit the notification bell for upcoming videos. We do videos throughout the year, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store. All right, Joe. So who is the second player that you hate?
Yeah, this really pains me to say, Steve, because I don't hate this guy. Actually, I really like this guy, but where he's going in right now as far as value, I hate the value he's going for. And that's going to be running back Isaiah Pacheco, currently going for $34, the same as Derrick Henry, a couple of dollars more than Travis Etienne. And I like Pacheco. I think he's going to have a really good year, and I think he's going to build off of last year. And I think this Kansas City Chief offense is different, and I think they're going to stick with the run. I don't think they're just going to let Mahomes continually pass like they have, despite I think everyone's excited for the wide receiver core, that they've got some upgrades, and I think people just assume that Mahomes is going to pass more. I actually think they're going to rely on Pacheco. They're, haven't brought back Jerick McKinnon. I think Pacheco's looking like a 3-down back. He obviously can make plays in the receiving game as well. But when you're going at your draft and just like, at $34, do I want, Pacheco or Derrick Henry with the Ravens? And I keep siding with Derrick Henry at that point.
Yeah, it's interesting. I tend to agree with you as well. But if you look at what Pacheco was able to do, he didn't even play a full season.
I know.
And he was able to do what he was able to do. So, and he really doesn't have any competition.
Right.
I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a non-factor. They have guys like Deneric Prince, Reese Zammit. So I see the path. I see the path of him getting there. He's not a guy I typically like to go after, and it's quite a lot to invest in him. I do think it's a little bit more interesting now that Hollywood Brown is going to, possibly has this injury that he's dealing with, and will it be okay in the however many weeks they say it's going to take, 4 or 6 weeks? Will he be okay, or is it going to linger throughout the season? Because then that's like, okay, maybe they will have to rely more on the running game, because it seemed like they were really beefing up their passing offense.
Yeah, I think they're trying to, but I still think this offense is going to flow through Pacheco, which that's the tough part for me, is because I really like Pacheco. I think he's going to have a good year. Just, again, I don't know. It's tough for me to pay up that value just because he had a really good season last year. I know it was, a 14-game span, but it's like, I think it's risky, because what if it doesn't end that way? And what if the Chiefs offense doesn't do what we expect?
Well, I think it fits the hate narrative, though, right? Because you really actually love the player,
Right?
And you want to take him, but you just hate how much he's going for.
Yeah, just when I just think if I'm, betting on what could happen, I'm more confident in Derrick Henry giving me that return, especially because he's going to get those touchdowns where a lot of times Kansas City will just throw on the goal line, and then there goes Pacheco, loses an opportunity to get a rushing touchdown, where it's like Lamar Jackson's one of the few rushing quarterbacks that doesn't vulture touchdowns from running backs.
So the second player that I hate the value. And, it's a shot across the bow because you're going to disagree with me on this. But it's going to be wide receiver Chris Olave. Right now, he's going for $32 right now in auction drafts, and he's currently sitting as wide receiver 9. Well, last year, he finished as wide receiver 16. So I guess I'm just not understanding why the increase. Like people can say, well, look at their receiver room, which, they're not wrong. But they have Rashid Shaheed. They had Rashid Shaheed last year. They had Michael Thomas, but he got hurt and, became a non-factor. So they didn't really have a lot of weapons to begin with before. And Derek Carr and Chris Olave, they never really seemed to be on the same page. So maybe you can, prove me otherwise or convince me. But I just don't understand why. Maybe it's just the inflation of our economy right now. But why is his value getting inflated?
I just think it's a young wide receiver, and the intrigue is there. Like you said, lack of competition for targets in the offense. And I know Derek Carr's not the best quarterback, but Olave is going to get a ton of targets in this offense, and he likes to get those deep routes. So I think he's a good ceiling. And if you're trying to bet for upside, I think Olave's got a decent ceiling. And you got to say, as much as there was like miscommunication, it was also their first year together. I would expect that the communication and stuff gets better in year two. I also don't know how much this offense potentially changes. Pete Carmichael's no longer there. He was kind of running the offense for the Saints, which who knows, could be better or worse. I have no idea what to expect. But I think Olave is kind of, he is risky, but it's also kind of a safe bet just because it's like I don't know who's going to take targets away from him, and whether whether he catches them all, he's going to have his opportunity to eat is going to be there.
I guess I understand that, but then do you really think he's going to do better than what he was before? I mean, he had 138 targets last year and 87 catches for over 1,100 yards and 5 touchdowns. I mean, how much better is the guy going to get?
I think you'd like that touchdown number to go up.
I just don't see it.
No, you might not see it, but I mean, there was definitely a lot of plays left out there last year just because Derek Carr is not throwing the best passes, and I know you're just going to say that's Derek Carr and he won't throw the best passes, but Derek Carr is also done well with a guy like Davante Adams. And
Yeah,
I
but
know
I know you're going to
Olave's not
say
the
that, but
same
that's
caliber.
different, though. No, it's not right.
Yeah, I know what you're going to say as a counterpoint. So
you were trying to get ahead of it. Good work. I just think at the end of the day, Chris Olave is one of the most hyped players, in my opinion, that people always hype
he
him up
is.
because he's got the potential and he just never lives up to it.
Yeah, he just hasn't lived up to it yet. I mean, I don't know. I was big on him as far as, looking at him as a sophomore breakout last year. I still think he's got potential, but you're right. At $32, I don't love having to spend over $30 for him.
All right, Joe. So who is your final player that you hate their value?
Yeah, I'm going to go with another wide receiver here, and I'm going to go with wide receiver Davante Adams, and he's currently sitting at $28. And I think just with guys around him going a lot cheaper that I just prefer, honestly. Like, a guy like DJ Moore is only going for $22. He's a lot younger in that Chicago offense who potentially has more upside. I know they're going to battle for targets out there between Odunze and Keenan Allen and him. They're all going to have their games. But I'm really concerned about Davante Adams in this quarterback situation with the Las Vegas Raiders, whether it's going to be Minshew or Aiden O'Connell. Just because a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo just couldn't get him the ball. O'Connell came in, hyper targeted him, and he did somewhat better. But he had just so many up and down games that I just think when you look at it overall, his numbers were decent. But if you look at his like game by game breakdown, there was a ton of games in there. He was just really disappointing for fantasy, or that he was very good. And there's just not much in between. And the guy is 31, and I know he's just been an absolute like grinder and just been out there, but he's 31, and I'd rather be avoiding him at $28 in the chance that this is the year that everything falls off than pay the $28 and be like, oh man, why did I do that?
Do you think it's possible his intrigue is due to the fact that people think he'll get traded, possibly to the Jets?
I think that's overblown. Honestly, I just don't see him getting traded. Like, I mean, it would have to be mid-season after the Raiders, you know, aren't doing well or something. But at the end of the day, like the Raiders could be, it should be competitive. I mean, they got a decent enough defense. Christian Wilkins and Max Crosby on defense, they should be able to keep them in games. You know, it's just really, you know, how many points is this offense going to score, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, he was a guy that was on my radar too. I just don't have a lot of confidence in like you said, the quarterback picture there. I mean, you could make the same argument with Olave. I mean, Adams should be the guy who gets the sole amount of targets. You could argue that he actually has more talent around him than Chris Olave does. But both offenses are sort of anemic, if you ask me.
Yeah, I guess I still think like Las Vegas has more potential threats or other guys to throw the ball to than New Orleans does. I mean, they still Jacoby Myers, you know, he's okay. But then them drafting Brock Bowers, which I think they're going to make it a point to get him his targets and involvement in the offense. The Saints don't have anyone else, you know, a polarizing player like Brock Bowers.
So my final player that I am hating the value, and I'll be curious because we haven't talked about this guy that much. So I'll be curious your reaction to this. But I'm going to go with tight end Mark Andrews for $20. Coming off last year, I believe it was an ankle injury that essentially ended his season. I think people and this is just my view, you may disagree with me on this. I think they're sort of chasing history when it comes to Mark Andrews, and I'll explain that in a little here. So Mark Andrews back in 2021 had over 150 targets, had 107 catches, 1,361 yards, and 9 touchdowns. That was the year where he really just took off, right? Since then, the guy can't stay healthy. He played 10 games in 2023. He played 15 games in 2022. In 2020, before that, he played 14 games. So he isn't one to play most likely a full season, first off. But second off, besides that season, he's just been okay. I mean, I'm not saying he hasn't been good, but people are drafting him in the mindset that, hey, this guy could really help my team and make me win. I just think, why spend the $20 when you can get guys like Kincaid, Pitts for $13, Evan Ingram for 11? Heck, even a guy like Jake Ferguson for 9 in that Cowboys offense that doesn't have a lot of targets, or better yet, Brock Bowers for $6. So to me, it's like, why are you spending up for $20? I think they're chasing what he was in 2021, and I just think that's ancient history at this point.
Yeah, honestly, I just think you're buying the name value of Mark Andrews. And I still think people just say, oh, what if he does play a full season? You know, all they really have to throw to is Zay Flowers out there. You know, Odell Beckham's done.
True.
They don't have a true wide receiver, too, honestly. I mean, yeah, Rashad Bateman's, you know, right. But people have been clamoring for him for years. And a name you didn't even mention on the same team. Just give me Isaiah Likely.
I agree. I agree.
When you want to bet it upside at the tight end position, and honestly, you could take Likely late in the draft. And I know it's not popular to have 2 tight ends in your roster, but I'd rather slap him on my roster. And there's rumors that he's even being lined up at wide receiver, so he might actually get some action even with Andrews on the field. And then we saw what Likely can do when a guy like Mark Andrews isn't on the field, and Likely took over and honestly was solid for fantasy at the tight end position.
Isaiah Likely averaged 13.7 yards per game. Or
yeah,
I mean, he averaged per catch, I mean, not per game. That blows Mark Andrews out of the water. The closest he ever had was 12.7 back at that 2021 season. But he had 411 yards, Isaiah Likely did, with 5 touchdowns. Andrews had 6. You know, Likely was a guy coming out of college. People were like, he's slow, didn't perform well in the combine. He's just a football player. I'm with you. I really like Likely as well. And now, you know, obviously, thankfully, he's okay. But we heard that Mark Andrews was in a car accident.
Yeah.
And he seems to be doing good, and he's not going to have any issues. So it shouldn't really be that much of a problem. Now, how much the team truly reports or doesn't report, we will never know. But I think at the end of the day, I agree. I think you're chasing name value. And I just don't understand why you would do it. He's a guy I'm just completely avoiding because for the amount of money he's going for, I would much rather go cheaper at the position. Or if you're going to pay up, go ahead, pay up. I mean, I don't believe in it, but if you want to pay up for a guy like Laporta or pay up for a guy like Kelce because of the name value, like, okay, I see the argument. I don't see the argument with Andrews.
Yeah, honestly, to that point, just pay the $6 more, get Travis Kelce. Don't get roped into the Mark Andrews stuff. And I don't understand why he's going for that much, other than the fact that, like you said, people are just the name values there and expecting Mark Andrews to be Mark Andrews when he is healthy. But he can't play full season. And, there comes a time where these guys just, fall off and just aren't what they are. And you just don't want to be overpaying for them in that season when they do.
So that does it for this episode. Now, this may have been too negative for you. And if it was, that's okay. Because you should check out our most recent episode where we talk about players that we love. That's going to be a much more happy episode. You're going to want to check that out. Thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time.